So, today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the overview of it, like the history, when it began, who started it, and some other topics like classes and objects. Why are they so important? How can we declare or create the objects and use them in Java, the different data types that Java offers, and most important things, loops, decision making, and I'm gonna go through few examples of how to write code in Java, and also you can code along with me. I've actually copy pasted the online link to the online editor in the chat window. Like if you scroll top a little bit, we are using the online editor, online compiler. So when we are going through the examples, you can open that and we can all code together to see what output it's giving, things like that. So let's begin. So a little history. Java is one of the high-level programming languages, and it's originally developed by Sun Microsystem by James Gosling, and it's released in 1995. So it's basically like 25-year-old programming language and most commonly used one in the software industry. So I don't know, I kind of feel like if you know Java, you can learn any different kind of language. I love it. It's my favorite programming language. And one of the reasons it's really good is Java runs on variety of platforms like Windows, Mac, or Linux, or Unix, or anything. So for some programming languages, if you write a program in Windows machine, you cannot copy paste the same program into the Linux machine, and it gives like the compiler related errors or something like that when you are running the code. But Java doesn't have that issue, so it's basically like there is a line called write once, run anywhere. So it's like you can write once and then compile the program, and then you can run on any different machine with any different underlying configuration. So it's one of the really nice things about Java, and that's the reason why a lot of people in the computer science industry use it. The overview of Java. These are the things that make it interesting. So it's object oriented. What it means is like the communication in the language takes place between the objects. So objects communicate with each other in order to see what to do, how to do things, or something like that. And it's platform independent, like what I said, and it's simple and secure. So even some of the institutions like banks, they use Java as an underlying programming language because it's very secure. So it's very nice to use for those kind of things too. It's robust, it's multi-threaded. Because it's multi-threaded, it's fast. So because it's fast, it means it's like it's giving the high performance. And Java can also be really used to have a distributed application. So what distributed means is like you can deploy this application in different kind of regions like Europe and US and Asia and all of it, and people from different continents can use the application, and the application itself intertalks to each other. So it's pretty good, right? Because in this kind of a modern world, the application needs to be distributed, because for any application, you have customers everywhere from all over the world. So it's not just enough to have it in a specific region. So it's good, it's dynamic. This is the overview, and these are the platforms commonly known to have, like the top two ones are the online compilers. We are going to use the first one today in our class, and if you guys want to download it, it's NetBeans and Eclipse are really good. I used to use both of them when I was developing projects in college, so they're pretty nice. Okay, let's start with the topics, and the most important thing is the classes and the objects. So what does it mean by a class? For a simple definition, a class is basically a blueprint of an underlying object, underlying thing. For example, I'll explain a little bit according to the example, so it's easier for you guys to understand. So if you look at the example of the class, this one, the public class dog is the name of the class. Dog is the class that we are talking about. And what does the class contain? Class basically contains the properties and the methods. Property means the specific characteristics of the class. So for example, in our scenario, the dog has few things like breed, age, color. And what can it do? What can the dog do? It can bark and it can be hungry and it can sleep. So it's like these are the methods. So basically, class is like a blueprint of an underlying thing. So can anybody give me an example of some other examples of class? Okay, I'm gonna come to the chat window. Any other examples of a class? Anything can be a class. Example, student. Student can be a class. Class student. What do you think the properties of a student are? Properties. What can the properties be? ID, the student. What else does the student have? Age, grade, yes, wow. What else? Name. Yes, name. IQ, wow, interesting. What else? Father name, mother name. School, yes, school, because you have grade, yes. And different classes they go to, classes, something like that. Okay. Yeah, good. What are the methods then? What does the student do? You can take classes. What else? They can do work, yes, excellent. And check the grade, write essays, play sports, study. Wow, okay, all good. Interesting. What else that we can do? Attending class, yes, like we are all doing now, attending class. Yeah, so you guys got the gist of it, right? So basically, a class is a blueprint of anything, any underlying thing. And each class contains properties. Properties means the characteristics. And the methods. Methods means what is it that the class can do. That's it. So in simple terms, this is it. Let's take one more example. Can somebody give an example of a class? Anything? Oh, phone class. Okay. Okay, phone can be a class because there are different kinds of phones, and each phone has a different kind of properties, size, and what is it? The brand of the phone, and so many things like that. Can somebody else give an example? Okay, let me show that. What about class? Movie. Movie can be a class. Like, what are the properties of the movie? The name of the movie, actor name, actress name, duration of the movie, something like that. And what can the methods be? Start watching, stop watching, movie duration, few things like that. So I think you all got the gist of it, what a class means. So I'll move on. Okay, so now that you know what a class means, the other one is object. Basically, an object is an instance of a class. What it means is a specific instance of a class. Like when we consider class student, let's say if Alice is one of the students. So if we create an object with name Alice, it's basically an object. So object is basically an instance of a class. So any class can have any number of objects. Like if you consider the option dog, there can be multiple objects of type dog. Like, you can name whatever you want them, and they all have the same properties like breed, age, color, barking, hungry, sleeping, or whatever, all of these, and any other extra properties and methods too. So yeah, so is it clear or is it a bit confusing? Class is a blueprint. An object is like one specific instance of a class. So let's say if we consider a movie, any movie like Room on Holiday or what else? Breakfast at Tiffany's or something like that. So they can all be the objects because they are like of type movie. Is it clear or is it a bit confusing? Okay, nobody is talking, so clear. Okay, okay, so let's move on. So, what else does a class contain? Each class as a constructor. So, constructor is like if we do not even write explicitly a constructor, the Java compiler automatically builds a default constructor for that class. So each time a new object is created, at least one of the constructor will be invoked. So the main rule of the constructor is that it should have the same name as the class. So if you look at the example, the public class puppy, there are two constructors here. One is public puppy without any parameters given, like it's the default one that the compiler generates, and there's another constructor, public puppy, with the string name. So what it means is this constructor takes one parameter called the name. So when we are creating an object, we can automatically pass in the name of the puppy, and then the object will be created with that name. I'll show you an example in the next slide how to create an object. So if you look at the bottom of the slide, public static void main string args, this is the main method in the Java program. So every Java program inside a class, there should be a public static void main method, because that is the first method that the compiler calls. So public is because it should be public, because anything should be able to call it. Static is used for the memory purposes. Void is the return type. The main method does not return anything, so it's just void. And main is the name of the method. We can't change this method name. It should always be public static void main, and it's taking a bunch of arguments. And if you look at this, following statement would create an object my puppy. So this is how we create an object. So there exists a class called puppy. So the first word should be the name of the class, puppy. The second word is whatever you want to name your object. Here I just named it my puppy. If you wanna name something like Doggo or Chino or something like that, you can just name it like that. And the third one is equals to. New is how we create the object. It's called instantiation. So whenever we use the new keyword in Java, it means that we are creating the object. So new, and again the fourth word should be like the name of the class, new puppy, because puppy is the name of the class. And in the brackets, we are giving Tommy because that's what the name of the dog is, the name of the puppy is. So whenever this happens, when the code runs, it goes to the class puppy and it checks to see if there is any constructor which takes one parameter string. So see, if you look at this in the here, oh my god, sorry. Yeah, if you look at this constructor, there is a method constructor which accepts one parameter called name. So what happens is the compiler goes to that constructor and then it just prints past name is plus name. So it prints the name of it. I can show you an example. Let's take this example and go to our online compiler. Did everybody open the compiler? Okay, let me send the message again in the chat window. So if you open it, it looks a bit like this. So it's this one, the public class hello world. The name of the class here is hello world by default, but if you want to do something like dog, you can create public class dog and the main method. So if you can click on execute, it's gonna show the result here. See, it compiled the class dog.java and the result it printed is hello world. So system.out.println is used to print out the statements. It's like cout. See out, I think in C. Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So let's create. Let me get it from PPT and then. Okay. Not that. And for the class, I'm adding the constructor. Constructor should be public, and the name of the constructor should be equal to the name of the class. So again, it's a dog. So I'm gonna take the string name. What happens here is, what I can do here is system.out.println, and I'm gonna print the name of the dog. And here, I'm creating an object of type mypuppy. So let me execute and see. Oh, this should be capital. I'm sorry guys, it's dog. See the name of the dog, Tommy. So name of the dog is Tommy. So let's talk about what happened here. So when I tried to run this program, it ran dog.java, and as I said, the compiler always goes to this public static void main method as like the beginning step. It's like an entry point to the program. So it comes here and it looks at this line and it says, okay, they want to create an instance of a class dog. The object name is called mypuppy, and they're passing in an argument string. So it goes here to this constructor, and this argument is considered as like a name. So it goes into that and then it prints this. Clear till now? Okay. Let's move ahead then. Okay, so what are the different data types in Java? In our previous example, we are using a string. So this is how we declare a string, but there are like bunch of different data types. So byte is a 8-bit number. So it's like if when you want to declare a byte, it's like byte A equals to 100. So byte is the type of the data type, A is the name of the data type, and 100 is the value of it. And there are like bunch of data types like byte, short, int. Int is the most commonly used one because it's integer. We just directly declare as an int. This is how you do it. Int, small letters, and name of the integer and the value of the integer. Integer is like a 32-bit long number. If you want a really long number, if it's more than 32-bit, and if you want to have something like that, you declare it as like a long. The name itself says it's like a long integer. And float, if you want to use a decimal thing like weight or something that, what else, currency, you should declare it as like a float so that it doesn't round it off. So you can have something like 234.5 or 12.4. Double is also a little bit of decimal number, but with more digits after the point. And character, char is one of the most commonly used one. Char example equals to A. This is how you declare it. And string, it's string str equals to good morning. So if you notice it, char is the single quote. When you declare it or initiate it, it's a single quote. String is the double quote. If you do it otherwise, it's gonna give the compile time errors. And the boolean is like either true or false. And object is what we discussed in our previous slide. Object is how we create it. Yeah, that's it. And let's move on. Any questions till here? No? Okay, Cool. Let's look at loops. I think since you took some classes on JavaScript, you might have already came across what the concept of loop is. So loop is basically it allows us to execute a statement or a group of statements when a condition is met. So if you look at the diagram figure here, so when the compiler reaches this condition, it checks to see if it's true or not. If it is true, it runs this conditional code. If it's not true, if the condition is evaluated as false, it exits the loop. So, and it stays in the loop as long as the condition is false, as long as the condition is true, and it only exits when it's false. So let's take few examples. Some of the, anybody know what are the loops, what examples of loops are? Did anybody use loops? Yes, like for and while, yes. What else? And do while. Have you heard about it? Do while. So I'm going to show you how to use for loop, while loop, and do while loop, and what the syntax looks like in Java. So let's start with the while loop. So this is how it looks. So it's the keyword is while, all small, and the while loop repeats a statement or a group of statements until the condition is true. It tests the condition before executing the loop. That's the main difference between while loop and the do while loop. So if you look at the example here, so while I less than 10, it just prints the value of I, and then it increments it. So if we go back to the compiler, let's run this, and all I'm doing is I have an integer I equals to 0, and while I less than 10, what I'm doing is I'm printing the value of I and then incrementing the I. So can anybody tell me how many times this loop is executed? Anybody? So it starts at 0 and then it goes from 0, 1, 2, because if you look at it, initially when the compiler comes here, I value is initially 0. So is 0 less than 10? True, right? So it enters the loop and then it prints this. And now I becomes 1. So it goes again to check the condition. So 1 less than 10. True, right? So it again goes into the loop. It goes into the loop until 9. So when I equals to 9, 9 less than 10, it goes in, it prints the value, and then it increments the value of I from 9 to 10. So now what happens? Here, 10 less than 10, false. So it exits out of the loop. So it basically prints it from 0 to 9. So it's like 10 times. Let's execute this. See, value of I, it went from 0 to 9, and exactly when I equals to 10, the condition fails, so it comes out of the loop. Okay, let's continue with some other.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah, sure.
So like about like the other page of like the loop. So like I is equal to 9, right? And then like the I, like the increment is like underneath the while statement, isn't it? So why wouldn't?
No, okay. If you look at it, the bracket, it ends after this. This whole thing is the loop. What's the question again?
Because I'm just confused, because isn't 9 still less than 10?
Yes, 9 is less than 10. So it enters this loop and then it prints this thing, value of I equals to 9. It prints here.
Oh, okay.
After that, it increments. Now the value here becomes 10. So it goes here, checks 10 less than 10. Now, false, right? So that's why it exits the loop. That's why it doesn't print value of I equals to 10 because it's done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. Next question. Let's see how we can. So the good thing about the loops is like we can use any kind of a loop. They all function the similar way. So if we use a while loop, while I less than 10 do this, and if we use a for loop, it exactly does the same thing. So if how to do it is like how we declare a for loop is for int. It uses a loop variable, so we should always declare a loop variable inside the loop. So for I equals to 0, so the value of I starts with 0, and until the I value is less than 10, every time increment the value of I by 1. I plus plus is equal, what it means is like I equals to I plus 1 in simpler terms. You can also use, instead of I plus plus, you can use I equals to I plus 1, and inside it you can write whatever you want to do. So let me show again, going back to this. So for int j equals to 0, j less than 10, j equals to j plus 1, system dot out dot println value if I execute it, see, if you look at this, the value of I, it goes from 0 to 9. Also, if you look at this, the value of j goes from 0 to 9. So it's basically, when you want to use loops, you can use any of the loop, like while loop or for loop or a do while loop. They all do the same thing, like very similar to each other. The only thing different is like how you declare it, how you define the loop variable. So for the while loop, you need to declare the variable before the loop begins, something like that. So for the for loop, you can define it inside the loop itself, like in the beginning of the loop, and it does the same thing. And let's see the other kind of a loop. It's do while loop. Do while loop is a little bit different to the while loop. So what it does is it checks the condition at the end of the loop. This is how you declare it. So the do comes, the do, and then the braces, and inside that you write a bunch of statements what the loop wants to do, and at the end of the loop you declare the state, the condition of the loop. So here, do while I less than 10. So what happens is the first time it doesn't check the condition, it always enters the loop no matter what. Let me show you an example of that. So do let's take the variable k, value of k plus k. Here we write while k less than 10, and I need to define what the value of k is. K equals to 0. It's very similar to what we are doing. So the loop begins from 0 and it needs to do till 10. So when I run it, why is it taking so long? I think it got struck. So we are not incrementing the value of k, so it went into an infinite loop. So k plus plus. So see, if the bottom value of k went from 0 to 9. So let's remove all of this because It's too much. Okay. See value of k from 0 to 9. So the difference between a while loop and a do while loop is it goes in without checking the condition. Let me change this value from k equals to 0 to k equals to 100. So for the do while loop, since it doesn't check the condition in the very beginning, it goes and enters the statement. So see value of k equals to 100. After that, what happened? Okay, after that, after the conditions have after the statements have executed, then it goes here. It checks to see this condition is 100 less than 10, false, right? So it exits out of the loop. So that's the main difference between while and do while loops. So for the while loop, it checks the condition at the very beginning of the statement, and if it's true, then only it enters the loop. For the do while, it doesn't check at the beginning, it checks at the end to see if it want to continue the loop or it want to exit it. Yeah, any questions still here? Good. Okay, then cool. Let's move on to our next topic. So, here comes the decision making. I think you might all be familiar a little bit. So, decision making is very similar to in the real life. It's basically like if you want to do this, no, if not, do something else. So, if you look at the figure on the right hand side, there is always a condition. So if the condition equals to true, then run this part of the code. If the condition equals to false, then run something else. So it's like decision is always taken based on the condition, and based on the condition is true or false, it does something. There are a bunch of decision making things in Java. Like most common ones are if condition. So basically it's like if a equals to 100, do this. Or if else, if a equals to 100, do this, else, do this. And the switch statement, and the nested if and ternary operator. Nested if is like if a equals to 100, do this, else if a equals to 200, do this. Again, else if a equals to 300, do this. So it's basically like multiple if statements. Or it can be inside. If else loop can also be an inside and if else loop. Like I'm gonna show a couple of examples so it's better for you guys to understand what's happening. So how do we define if a given number is even or odd? So this is a program that somebody asked you to write. So how do you write it? Initially, this is the method. Public is the the modifier for the method. You can have a bunch of things like public, private, default. So based on how you want to expose the method, you can declare it. So if you don't want the method to be public, you can declare it as like private. So private static void, and even or odd is the name of the method, and we are passing in the number. So how do we know if a number is even or odd? So when we divide by 2, if the remainder is 0, then the number is even. If not, the number is odd. So if you look at it, we are using the decision making for this. So we are using an if-else condition. So if a number satisfies this, then this, or else this. So let's actually run it. I have the code already, so I'm gonna just copy paste it here. So, okay. So there's this method even or odd. And as I told you guys that the compiler always goes to this method. So now from this method, we have to call this method even or odd. How do we call another method from a main method? Is basically use the name of it And since this method is taking one parameter of type integer, just pass in an integer, a number, and a semicolon. So now when I execute it, what happens is the compiler goes initially to this method, and then it sees that this method is calling another method. So then it goes here. Now, since I'm passing the value number 10, it checks if 10 is divided by 2 properly without a reminder. If so, then it's going to print number is even. If not, the number is going to be odd. Can somebody tell me what it's going to print for number 10? Is number 10 even or odd? Even, yes. So let's run it. See, number is even. One of the good things of writing the code, passing in the variable, is that we can just change this. Like if we want to see if number 15 is even or odd, we can just change this and then run it. So now it shows number is odd. So when writing the methods, the good way is to pass in a variable, and the whole method depends on the passed variable. Some people write things like if 10 percentile 2 equals to 0, the number is even, else or something like that. But if somebody looks at the code, you specialized this method to only use 10 all the time. It doesn't consider this. So it's like a bad way of programming. So always make it generic, so that when somebody wants to run with a different input, if they can just change the method calling and then run it. So it's easier and it's cleaner to look. It's better for other people to understand. So yeah, this is the first example. I'm going to go through a bunch of examples with you. Okay. The second example is print square of the numbers from 1 to 10. So now, what do we need to do? So it's like, it should print the square of 1 is 1, square of 2 is 4, square of 3 is 9. So, when you see something like do something from this to this, always you should try to remember this is something simple, that you want to use loops. So I actually wrote the example 3 different ways how we can use for loop, while loop, and the do while loop for the same thing. And if you look at it, if you look at the first method, public static void print squares is the name of the method. It's not going to take any input because it's always going to print the numbers from 1 to 10. So it can start from, for int I equals to 1, I less than 10, I plus plus, because that's how we declare the for loop. And what does it need to do? It just need to print the square of the numbers. So what should we do? Square dot system dot out dot println square of I is I into I. So if I, let's do this. Okay. I don't have it. Let's type it then, copy paste, and let's go back. So each class can contain any number of methods. So after this method ends here, I can use another method, public static void print squares, and add a proper indentation. So the for loop ends here and this method ends here. So okay, print squares. So if I need to call this instead of even or odd, I just need to call that method. Since the print squares method doesn't take any parameters, all I have to do is just do print squares and the semicolon, So the compiler, when it goes to the main method, it goes to the print squares method, and when it comes here, this is what it does. So from I equals to 1 to 10, each time increment the value of I. So you can write it as I plus plus, or you can also do I equals to I plus 1. It's up to you. And what does it needs to do in the method? System.out.println, the PPTs and the compilers. Indentation is a little bit different, so let me just make it proper. So it just need to look green if it's a string. Yeah, so square of I is I into I. So if I execute this, see what happens. So if the loop begins from I equals to 1, and then it goes till 9, 81. So I have a small question for you guys. So what if I want it to print from 1 to 10? So what if I want square of 10 is 100? What should I modify in this code? So I want square of 10 is 100 along with all of this. Do you want to see? So in this, what can we change? See, if you look at this loop, it starts from 1, so it prints square of 1 is 1, and then it increments. So I becomes 2, so it prints square of 2 is 4, and then I becomes 3, square of 3 is 9. So in the same way, when I equals to 9, square of 9 is 81, and I becomes 10, what happens here? 10 is less than 10, so it becomes false. So that's why it doesn't print square of 10 is 100. What should we do in order to make this true for 10? Yes, I less than 11. Right. We can do I less than 11. Let's run it. Its square of 10 is 100. There's other way we can do it too. So we can do something like I less than or equals to 10. This is the most common way people use. So I equals to 1, I less than or equals to 10. So the loop starts from 1 and then it ends at 10. So we definitely know that it's going to print 10 times. So both are correct. If we want to use I less than 11 or I equals to 10, less than or equals to 10, both are correct. So the one good thing about programming is actually you can write the same thing in multiple different ways and it's still going to produce the same result. So that's something I really like about programming. Yeah. So if you want to use a for loop instead of a for loop, if you want to use a while loop to do the same thing, what is it that you guys need to change here? Instead of for loop, you have to use a while loop. So copy the same thing and print squares using while. And what should we do here instead of this? For while loop, we always need to define the value before the loop, I equals to 1. And here, instead of for loop, we need to write while the condition, while I less than or equals to 10, do this whole thing. And after every statement, we need to increment the value of I. In the for loop, we automatically include it in the the declaration of the for loop. But in the while loop, we need to remember that we should increment the value of I. Otherwise, it just gets stuck in the infinite loop, and you see the round thing loading symbol for a while. And until you kill the program, it's still that because it's an infinite loop. So one common mistake that everybody does is forgetting this. So let's run it. Program. Oh, that was okay. Instead of calling the print squares method, I'm going to call the print squares using while and execute it. See, it gave us the same exact result. Square of I. Exactly same result using the for loop and the while loop, just that the way it's declared and defined are different. Other than that, it does the same operation. And what if we want to use do while here? What do we do? We just need to copy this do. It begins with a do, and we end the loop with the while statement, and then the semicolon. Let's run it. It's going to give us same exact result. See? Square of 1. So it's like the 3 different ways to use the loops. Is it clear? Or do you guys have any other questions for this example? It's pretty interesting, right? Like to use this different kind of thing and get the same exact result. So usually the most commonly used loop are the for loops, because it's very rare to make the mistakes in for loop, because in the line of the for loop itself you declare a variable, and then you also declare how to increment it, and also you declare the condition. So everything gets together in the for loop, right? Because see, int I equals to 1 is you declare it, assign a variable to a value, and you add a condition, and you do this, do the increment. So it's very easy, and you can avoid a lot of mistakes using a for loop, because it's all in one statement and you remember doing it properly. Whereas in while and do while loop, people tend to forget increment or decrement or something like that, and it creates bugs or issues later on. Okay, moving on. Okay, this example is pretty cool. So, given an array, do you guys know what an array is? Array is like a bunch of values together, bunch of integers together. So this is how you declare an array. Int array is declared using the square brackets. Int the opening square bracket and the closing square bracket array. So given an array, double the values of an array. And so what you need to do is basically create a new array. And okay, let's do one thing. Let's use the compiler and then do this. It's easier that way, so you guys can understand. I'm going to remove all of this because we're done with the print method. Okay, the public we should always be small, and okay, so this is how we create an array. Int array, any name of the array equals to, let's do 1, 2, 3. And the example that we are trying to do is like we want to double the array, so the output should be 2, 4, and 6, because that's the doubling, right? 1's double is 2, 2's double is 4, and 3's double is 6. So when I call this method double the array, what I should do? I should call the method, and since this method takes one parameter, which is an array of type array, I pass it, and that's it. If I call it, what happens? It is creating a new array of same length, because this length is 3. So if you do r dot length, it gives us the length of an array. This is how we create the new arrays. So basically, type, it's similar to how we create a class actually. The first parameter is the type, and the second parameter is the name of the array that you want to call, and it's always equals to followed by, and new is creating a new thing, new of type int given the length of it. So this is how you create a new array. So what do you want to do? You want to go from the beginning of an array to the end. So whenever you think of going from here to here, it's always a loop. So here we are going to use a for loop. So from index I equals to 0 I less than the length of the array, I plus plus. So go to the first element, the second element, the third element, like so on. What needs to happen inside? So we need to assign, double the value and assign it in the new array. So new array of I is that. Let's print the value. Okay. See, 246. So it came in. So it went from the beginning of the array to the end of the array, and then it just doubled the value and then it printed it. That's it. Let's do another example. Yeah, this is actually an exercise for you guys. So generate a multiplication table. So given a number, let's say this is like I gave you the number 2, you should print the multiplication table from 1 to 10. How do you guys do it? I'll give you a few minutes so you can think about it. At least give me a few ideas, even if you don't want to do the coding. Just what do we need to print something like this that we have learned in this today's class? So given a number, it needs to print the multiplication table from 1 to 10. Any ideas?
You could like use a loop for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a really good idea. That's how we're gonna do. So let's see. How should we write it? I'm gonna write it here. Public static void. What is it we need to do? Multiplication table. And as we discussed, it's always a good idea to pass in a variable a number. Because if I keep doing 2 into 1, 2 into 2, it's not a good idea, right? What if somebody wants a multiplication table of number 5 or number 10? So it's always good idea to pass in the number and then use loop. So what should we do? So for int I equals to 1, I less than or equals to 10, I plus plus. What should I do? I need to print. What should I print? Number. This is how we use concatenation. Plus is basically concatenating the strings. Number plus into plus I. Basically, the number, if we pass in the number 5 into 1 plus equals to, this is our multiplication table. Multiplication is basically number into I. So, hopefully this works. Let's see. So, I want removing this because we don't need that. And calling the multiplication table and passing in the value 2. So it should go from 2 ones are 2, 2 twos are similarly. Let's see if it works. Oh, see? So it started from 2, 2 ones are 2 because it's multiplying 2 into 1, and then I value becomes 2, so it becomes 2 into 2. I value increments again because we're using the for loop, and then we're using I plus plus. So I value is 3. So 2 into 3 equals to 6. So it does that till 2 into 10. because we're using I less than or equals to 10. So when I equals to 10, it prints the value and then I becomes 11. So it goes here and checks to see, is 11 less than 10, less than or equals to 10? No, right? So that's it, I'm done. Exit the loop. That's it. So let's see another example. Let's print a multiplication table for 5. All we need to do is change the input parameter. It just works like magic. 5 ones are 5 twos are till 5 into 10. Okay, small question. What if I ask you to print till 20? Till 5 into 20. The multiplication table till 20. It's a similar question like I asked before. We are going to do I less than or equals to 20, right? And then it prints automatically. What if I'm a little bit flaky and then I want from 10 ones, I want till 20 other time, I want till 30 another time? What can we do at that time? We can't keep going on inside the program and changing it all the time, right? So what is another way to do it? Can somebody tell me? Any ideas? Yes, of course, input. That's a really good way. Just like the way we are passing the number, we can do something like input it, int minimum, int maximum. So in the loop, I just need to use the min and maximum variables instead of the numbers 1 and 20 or 1 and 10. From the minimum to maximum, do this. What should I do here in the main class when I'm calling this method? Now, okay, let me not change anything and then do execute. What happens? I'm going to get an error because, see, actual and the formal argument lists differ in the length. I'm using just only one number and calling this method, but this method needs 3 inputs. So there is like a mismatch, right? So if there is a mismatch, it doesn't work. It needs to be exactly the same number of the arguments and also the same type of the argument. Let's see, I do this. I give 3 arguments, but instead of an integer, I'm expecting an integer, right? The third value. Instead of an integer, if I pass in a string, what does it happen? It again gives an error. See, string cannot be converted to an integer, and it's pointing the error to the third argument. So we can't do that. It's a really nice way to not create exceptions. So let's say I want the multiplication table of 5 from 1 to 30. See, it printed the whole table from 1 to 30. Let's say I want it from 10 to 30. I just need to change the minimum 10 to 30. So in this way, we can generalize the methods, and it's really useful for everybody to understand what happens when you see the method, and also you can change the input whenever you want rather than hard coding it. Hard coding something seems like a really bad idea because you can't just keep on going inside the program and changing it whenever you want, right? So it's really nice to have things as an input parameters and then change things. So yeah, any questions? Okay, I have one last example. I think we are pretty close to the time. It's 5:04 already. So I have one more example. Should I continue or should we stop here?
If it's okay with everyone else, I think we can just wrap up your presentation however long you need to take.
Okay, I have only one more example. It's a little bit complicated, but why not, right? So, example. Check if a given number is a prime or not. Can somebody tell me what a prime number is?
A number that's only divisible by 1 in itself.
Yes, yes, exactly. So the question now is, how do we write a program to check if a given input number is prime or not? What should we do? Let's say the input number is 5. How do we check if a number is prime or not? We need to start from 2 to 4 and then see if it's divisible by any of it. So 5 is 5 divided by 2. No. Is 5 divided by 3? No. Is 5 divided by 4? No. So it has only 1 and 5, 1 and itself as the factors. So the number 5 is a prime number. So what are we doing in this logic here? We are using some kind of a loop, checking from 2 to less than the number itself, and checking using an if-else statement again to see if it's divisible or not. So it's the combination of two things, the loops and the if-else condition. Okay, let's write the program then. Okay, again, it's public static void prime or not. And what is it taking? It's taking a number. So what happens? For int I equals to 2, I less than number, a plus plus. If a number percentile I equals to 0, then it means there is an additional factor other than the number and 1 and itself, right? So system.out.println number num is a prime number, and if it has at least one factor, it's a prime number, right? I don't need to continue, go on and check the rest of the numbers. Let's say I want to see if a number 100, if 100 is prime or not. So what do we need to do? 100 by 2. It is divisible. So 2 is a factor. Do we still need to go and check 100 by 3, 100 by 4, till 100 by 99? Do we need to or do we not?
No.
No, because we already know it's a factor, so it's a prime number. So in that cases, what we can do in order to improve the performance of the loop is, if we already know it's something is true, we can just use a break statement. Break is, if you do this, it exits out of the for loop and it exits out of the program. So basically, if you find at least one factor, then the number is a prime number. If not, once it exited the loop, then it's not a prime number. Yeah, let's try this. I'm gonna remove these things. What is our example that we took before? I think 5. So we are checking if 5 is prime or not. So it needs to check from 2 to 3 is, and then see, the number 5 is not a prime number. Let's check. So it went here, it checked 5 by 2, and then it incremented I became 3. So it checks 5 by 3, and it checks 5 by 4. When I became 5, 5 is less than 5 false, so it exits the for loop. Done. And then it says 5 is not a prime number. What about 6? If the input number is 6, so 6 by 2, it is divisible, right? 6 by 2 equals to 3, and the percentile is remainder. Remainder is 0, so it is a factor. So what happens here? It enters the for if loop. and then it says this number 6 is a prime number, and it just prints that out. It breaks out of the loop, and oh, I have an error, I have a bug in the code. It breaks out of the loop, and then also at the end of it, it prints this. So we're on 6. It's gonna print 2 times. 6 is a prime number and also not a prime number, because once it exited the loop, I'm still printing it. So what is a way to avoid it? What can we do? I can actually do a boolean flag, something like that. Flag equals to false. Initially it's false. So when the number is a prime number, I'll do this. Flag equals to true, and setting the flag is true. And I'll only print this if flag is false. If flag, what it means, if flag is true, I don't do anything. If flag is false, then I print this. See, it only printed number 6 is what? Oh, sorry. So if there is a factor, it's not a prime number. It's not a prime number. If there are no factors, then it is a prime number. See, the number 6 is not a prime number because it has a factor 2, which is, so it enters a loop and then it breaks out of it once it finds it. And yeah, let's try the other example. 7. 7 is a prime number. Yeah, that's it. So any questions regarding the whole class or anything, any other stuff? That's the end of my presentation. Or how did you like it? Did you understand what I was talking, or no clue? Good? Okay. Yeah, so that's it. That's the end of the class.